From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. Prince Andrew's downfall began with one woman.
The whole entire procedure, it was disgusting. He wasn't mean or anything, but he got up and he said thanks and walked out, and I sat there in bed just horrified and ashamed and felt dirty, and it was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life.
Born second in line to the throne, reportedly the Queen's favourite child, for years Prince Andrew had dodged difficult questions about his relationships and how he funded his lifestyle. But when Virginia Giuffre's allegations kept making headlines, and questions about the prince's friendship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein wouldn't go away, the rather too grand old Duke of York couldn't resist having his say.
I'm convinced that I was never in tramps with her. There are a number of things that are wrong with that story. One of which is that I don't know where the bar is in tramps. I don't drink. I don't think I've ever bought a drink in tramps whenever I was there.
That disastrous Newsnight interview led to an outcry. The palace stripped him of his HRH status and took away his military titles. His career as a working royal was over, smothered by disgrace. We thought that was the end of it, but just over a week ago, a new cache of emails emerged showing Prince Andrew writing to Jeffrey Epstein saying, "Keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon." Those emails had been sent months later than he'd previously told Newsnight that all contact had ceased.
Which was when I said to him, I said, look, because of what has happened, I don't think it is appropriate that we should remain in contact. And by mutual agreement during that walk in the park, we decided that we would part company, and I left, I think it was the next day. And to this day, I never had any contact with him from that day forward.
It was swiftly followed by the news that Prince Andrew had invited the Chinese official at the heart of the alleged China spy case to Buckingham Palace. That, coupled with the looming publication of an explosive new book by Virginia Giuffre, made Prince Andrew give up his royal titles before he was forced to.
Some breaking news. Prince Andrew is giving up his royal titles, including that of Duke of York. The palace says that's happened after a discussion with the king. He will remain a prince.
The book that terrified royal circles, Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, is published today. The Times has been hearing from its co-author, and we'll look at how much more there is to come on the scandal-ridden prince. The story today, the prince formerly known as a duke.
So I received the book late on Wednesday night, and I had, just a little over 12 hours to read this 400-page book. And I'm a quick reader, but that was, a lot quicker than I'm used to.
Katie Gatens is commissioning editor at the Sunday Times News Review, which gave her access to the book everyone's talking about, Virginia Giuffre's Nobody's Girl, before it was published.
I mean, there's been obviously so much hype about the book and what it contains. So when I was reading it, it did feel quite exciting, I suppose, to be one of the first people in the country to read it. And yeah, I mean, it's a very, very hard read. It's a very shocking and horrifying and harrowing read. Giuffre alleges a lifetime of sexual assaults and sexual abuse. So it is a hard read, and I think that Giuffre is very aware of the reader throughout. There are passages that, are very difficult to read, and then followed by interludes talking about Giuffre's family life with her children in Australia.
There are moments where she literally turns to the reader and says, I know this is a lot. Like, believe me, I live with this every day, but please come with me and I'm going to give you a break here. And I'm going to show you me and my kids singing in the car on the way to school.
And, there are moments of respite throughout. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bombshells I felt within the book.
And Katie, Virginia Giuffre, obviously now, having taken her own life, it's impossible to know her thoughts, but you did meet her co-author, Amy Wallace. Tell us about her.
So Amy Wallace is a feature writer and investigative journalist based in California, and she was Giuffre's ghostwriter, and they worked on the book for 4 years. They met in April 2021 over Zoom. She actually spent time living with Virginia at her home in Australia, about a month living in the family as a fly on the wall. They met up in Paris. They went to New York together. So she was very much immersed in her life. And I think they almost became quite close friends by the end. So the two met on Zoom in April 2021, and apparently Giuffre was doing interviews with lots of other ghostwriters at the time. And Wallace says that she suspects that she might have got the job to write her memoir because the project really needed an investigative journalist in order to fact check, research, make sure every single detail was correct.
She was making allegations, as she had for years, against a lot of rich and powerful people. She needed to be working with somebody who wouldn't just tape record her and then write a version, but who knew how to interrogate, how to bolster, how to report around, how to do research.
Because Giuffre's story is so intricate and has been pored over by so many people in order to discredit her story, that it really needed a forensic investigative journalist because they just had to get it right.
So this must feel like a big moment for her too, being able to get her friend, her collaborator's story out. We should say Buckingham Palace has already briefed that they expect more days of pain ahead after a difficult week, with all eyes on the former Duke of York. And they're expecting more days of pain because of this book. What does the book tell us about Prince Andrew?
So Amy Wallace never expected to be the face of the book and doing all of these TV interviews and interviews with newspapers, international newspapers. But obviously, due to Giuffre's death in April this year, she's stepped forward and has very much kind of become the face of this. And she's really giving Giuffre a voice after her death.
I'm glad to be able to talk about it, as hard as it is, because somebody needs to. And it was supposed to be her. But it's also, obviously, there's just a huge amount of sadness.
So the book details the 3 sexual encounters that Giuffre alleges she had with Prince Andrew. So it talks about her meeting him and being incredibly excited to meet a prince and going to grab her instant camera and asking Jeffrey Epstein to take a picture of them both, which we all know now as the photograph that exists of Giuffre and Prince Andrew with Ghislaine Maxwell in the background.
This is the photograph in which his hand appears at her waist, which he's raised doubts over.
Yeah, Andrew has cast doubt over whether that is a real or fake photograph. And it also talks about that evening where she alleges they took a taxi to Tramp nightclub and had danced on the dance floor. He bought her a drink. And then they went back to Ghislaine Maxwell's townhouse in London, and she was forced to have sex with him. And she also talks about 2 other sexual encounters with Andrew as well, which he denies.
And tell us where they took place.
So one is in Epstein's townhouse in New York, and the other is on his Caribbean island, Little St. James.
And Katie, obviously a lot of these allegations were already in the public domain. What the book gives us, I suppose, is an insight into Virginia Giuffre's mind. I mean, how did she view Prince Andrew? What did she say about him?
She says that she felt that he thought it was his birthright to have sex with her. And in the book, she describes his sense of entitlement, that he might want to have sex with her, who was 17 years old at the time, who he had just met, and just describes him after the event getting up, walking out, as if, it was all quite a normal encounter. In the book, Giuffre says that she quite clearly remembers Ghislaine Maxwell playing this game that she liked to play with Epstein's business associates, where she would make them guess the age of the girls. And the same happens with Andrew and Giuffre, where Maxwell says, "Can you guess her age?" And apparently Prince Andrew gets it in one and says, "I think she's 17. And the whole party are quite shocked that he managed to guess it. And apparently he says, "Yes, I've got daughters who are just a little younger than her."
We should say, again, he's always maintained that he had no contact with Virginia Giuffre, but he did agree to settle a sum of money on her without accepting liability. Does the book tell us any more about that process that they both went through, the legal case, or about the settlement?
So Virginia Giuffre was prevented from really revealing too much about that. That's part of the conditions of the settlement. All we know is that it was alleged at £12 million, and it included a gag order of 1 year so that she wouldn't speak out during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations in 2022. I think what was quite striking was I asked Amy Wallace how they hoped the royal family would receive this, or whether they anticipated they would receive it in any way. And they said they didn't really think about it.
We didn't think about the royal family specifically. We wanted everybody who had done wrong to be called out in whatever way she could do. And we wanted, more importantly, the average person, the public, to understand what that took.
So, Katie, tell us about why Amy Wallace and Virginia Giuffre worked on this book. What was the goal of publishing it?
Wallace said that this was very much a kind of end of chapter book, memoir for Giuffre. She was getting very mentally exhausted from having to kind of, in the words of Emily Maitlis on Newsnight, parading her trauma or, bringing it up in multiple interviews over the years. It obviously had a real damaging effect on Giuffre.
And our hope was that once the book was published, she could, for the first time since 2011, when she first came forward publicly, she could, if anyone asked her, like, tell me more about what they did on the island, or tell me more about that particular incident, she could say, I really respect your desire and need to hear that. I think it's important that people know it. But look over here on this bookshelf. I've put my story between two covers of a book, and I've done it as carefully, with as much nuance and accuracy as I could muster. Please read that. I now no longer do that. I'm in my present. I'm in my future. I want to talk about advocating for young girls who are victims of sexual abuse. I want to talk about doing away with statutes of limitations for abusers of children, sexual abusers of children. I want to talk about that. And I'm kind of done with that other part of my life. I'm done repeating.
I mean, the irony was that this was meant to be the end of that chapter of her life, and she was hoping to move on. But unfortunately, that wasn't meant to be.
My name's George Greenwood. I'm the investigations reporter at The Times, and I'm here today to talk about the latest developments in Prince Andrew's various scandals.
George, Prince Andrew has been keeping investigative reporters busy for a while now. Late last week, on Friday evening, we suddenly got the announcement that he was stepping back from being the Duke of York and relinquishing his royal titles apart from Prince, which is what he was born with. Just talk us through that. What exactly does it mean?
So this has come after a series of scandals, as the public, I'm sure, is very well aware, around his relationship with American financier Jeffrey Epstein, who was a notorious paedophile. And it has emerged over the recent weeks that Andrew's relationship with him continued after the point at which he'd said, I have had no contact with him. And that puts the royal family in a very difficult position. He was bringing it more and more into disrepute. So a decision was taken. It's clear that he could not remain as the Duke of York. It's a title that's got a lot of prestige and is generally given to a senior member of the royal family. So an agreement was reached between the King and Prince Andrew that he put that title into abeyance and not use it. Now, my understanding is that would have to be revoked by an Act of Parliament, but that I believe the royal family is trying to avoid that by taking away the ability of Andrew to use that in any of his activities.
He stepped back from the title, but that's an informal arrangement. If he was to be formally stripped of that title, if the title and the dukedom were to be formally revoked, it would need an Act of Parliament.
That's my understanding, yes.
What are we hearing from politicians? How keen are they to get involved with this? And how keen is the King for all of that to go to Parliament?
The royal family tends to try and keep things out as far as possible from the courts or from the House of Parliament. My understanding is that the royal family is always very keen to do these things informally where possible. Politicians over the weekend, we had a Miliband on the normal Sunday morning political shows saying it was a matter for the royals to sort of lead them on this, but that he didn't think it was something that parliamentary time should be used for. But I think it's quite clear how angry the public are that someone who is unelected acts with such authority. And I think many will say a strong message needs to be sent that is not necessarily sent by putting a title into abeyance. So it may be over the next few days that politicians come under greater and greater pressure to actually do something formal.
George, as I was saying, Prince Andrew has been of interest to investigative journalists for a very long time now, going all the way back to the breakdown of his marriage. He's a man who's long been known in the tabloids as either Randy Andy or Air Miles Andy. But even going all the way back to 2011, the only time he's actually landed in trouble, he's had to give up titles or give up jobs, has been because of Virginia Giuffre. She seems to have been the catalyst of his downfall. Just remind us how that played out.
Virginia Giuffre, very sadly, took her own life recently. She is the famous person in the picture. That led to a legal case in America which sought damages from him in a civil trial that was settled out of court. That means that a lot of the facts of the case were never fully established. The timeline was not established by a judge, and it has led to a lot of speculation around what happened, what can be proved, as a lot of those documents that were produced for that case were sealed afterwards. But it is understood that Prince Andrew had to pay a very large settlement to stop the case from moving forward. And despite the settlement, Andrew, of course, has accepted no liability and denies the allegations.
Even now that he's lost his titles as the Duke of York and other royal titles that he still held, now that they've gone, again, you'd think this would be a moment when a line is drawn. But questions are still being asked. You're reporting on this right now. I mean, just give us a sense of what more is to come.
As we've reported on the last few days, the concerns are less about what he does privately, much as it might be not helpful to the royal family, but actually what benefits he has from his office. One issue is that of Royal Lodge. It's a 30-room, multi-million-pound mansion in Windsor Great Park, and has been his seat since about 2003, 2004. That is a property that could either be let and bring income for the Crown Estate, which ultimately goes back to the taxpayer, or could be used for other public purposes. And there's a lot of anger about the fact that he's still able to enjoy this. There are also renewed concerns around his time as a trade envoy. It appears that he was spending large amounts on private hotel rooms. And finally, one of the big revelations over the weekend was that he appears to have asked one of his private security detail, who are members of the Metropolitan Police, to investigate Virginia Giuffre, even allegedly providing her social security number. Now, that all raised concerns about how a publicly funded security officer is being used by a member of the royal family.
So, George, just break those down for us. You mentioned the case, and this could end up being the most dangerous for him, I suppose. The allegations now that he used a police officer, a close protection officer. He tried to ask him to investigate Virginia Giuffre. Just explain why that becomes so problematic for him.
The problem he's got, if that is accurate and if the Metropolitan Police did look into her, is that effectively you're using public resources to deal with a personal vendetta. It's a really serious matter and raises really big questions for him in terms of his propriety. What we don't yet know is what the Metropolitan Police did after the officer was approached to conduct this investigation. And they're currently investigating what exactly happened after that request appears to have been made.
One of the other issues that you raised was about Royal Lodge. And a lot of people, when there was talk about him losing his titles, pointed to Royal Lodge as still an amazing grace and favour home. I mean, we know he does pay a rent on it. Give us the details. What is the deal with Royal Lodge and what's at stake? What might still change?
So Royal Lodge is a 30-room luxurious house. It's in Windsor Great Park. It's within the security zone at Windsor Castle. And it was passed to Andrew in the early 2000s under a long lease. It used to be the residence of the Queen Mother. Under the terms of that lease, it was not let on a commercial basis at that time because of the challenges of letting a property within the security envelope within Windsor Castle, but it was instead offered to Prince Andrew because he'd asked for it, and it was basically judged to be more than too difficult to do anything else with it. So originally this was given to him on the basis of £1 million payment for the lease and ongoing notional rent on the grounds that he spend some money renovating the property as well. But it's understood that's still not what it would be worth if it was rented on the market.
Is there anything that can be done about that? Is that lease binding?
So we contacted the Palace and the Crown Estate yesterday. The Crown Estate is the authority that has engaged the lease with him, but obviously the Palace is likely to know the details of that lease. We approached both of them to ask, could we have sight of a copy of that? The Palace directed us to the Crown Estate and did not respond to that point. And the Crown Estate directed us to a 2005 National Audit Report, which sets out some of the details of that lease, but doesn't provide a copy of that lease. This morning I filed an FY request for a copy of the lease with the Crown Estate, but I'm not holding my breath.
And you also mentioned the revelations that are now coming out from politicians about some of Prince Andrew's actions when he was a trade envoy, a pseudo-diplomat role. That actually ended back in 2011 when that picture with Virginia Giuffre first emerged, but it was a role that we know he loved. And he has since then still been in key meetings quite often with world leaders. Tell us a bit about what we're already hearing.
This weekend, we've heard further allegations about how Prince Andrew has handled taxpayer money. The former business minister, Paul Scully, has made the allegation that instead of staying at the embassy in Thailand, which has very reasonable accommodation, easily suitable for a prince.
This is on a trade trip.
And this is on a trade trip. He instead chose to stay at a very expensive luxury hotel instead. And all this comes down to questions of judgment. If you're acting on behalf of the public, there's an expectation that you look after their money properly. And this does not seem to have been a consideration for Andrew on some of his trips.
And when you say looking after public money, how much are we talking about with, for example, that one example of him staying in a luxury hotel rather than the embassy?
The allegation is a figure of around £50,000
oh, wow.
To stay for the trip at the hotel, and that's not pocket change.
And George, one of the stories that emerged over the past week at a time when Prince Andrew was already in the eye of the storm was linked to the China spy scandal that's rocking Westminster. Just talk us through what we know.
Andrew's recent record with China has been yet another scandal to surround him. He had a relationship with Yang Tangbo, He was a Chinese businessman who has been excluded from the UK on allegations that he's been acted as a Chinese agent, ones we should say Yang denies. And as part of that, was involved in various business dealings. It's now emerged that quite a senior Chinese politician had a number of meetings with him. While some of these were fairly public, I believe Jeremy Corbyn and Nicola Sturgeon were also meeting the same Chinese politician in one of these meetings. It has emerged that this Chinese politician is also a key contact of the two men alleged to have been acting as Chinese agents, whose trial has recently collapsed.
This is the man they were effectively reporting back to, Tsai Chi, who is known as, unofficially, President Xi's chief of staff, his gatekeeper, so a really central figure in the Chinese administration. That, again, will raise eyebrows about judgment, but also Prince Andrew's continued access to very important people in countries that we may not want to be doing business with.
The challenge, again, with him outside the circle to some extent, is that there's nothing really to stop him freelancing. And I think the key issues, especially when it comes to countries like China, is what is he actually doing? What is he offering? What is he promising? These are all questions which we don't yet have an answer to. And I think that this may well have been a consideration with King Charles to have pulled the rug under his dukedom as fast as possible in case something else emerges. I think it's maybe a precautionary measure.
George, you've approached the palace and Prince Andrew about these stories that are still rumbling along. What have they said?
So we've tried to reach Andrew for comment on this, but we haven't received any sort of response from him on these latest revelations, and we've received no on-the-record comment from the palace.
And just finally, as an investigative journalist, do you think this is the end of people digging into Prince Andrew? If he's stepped back, relinquished his royal titles, if something changes with Royal Lodge, or even if it doesn't, is this now a full stop, or do you think there'll be more to come?
I am sure that my editors will be asking me what I've got on Andrew for the rest of my career until he retires from public life completely. I've no doubt there'll be more to find. But what that is, who knows?
That was George Greenwood, investigations reporter at The Times. And earlier you heard from Katie Gatens, the Sunday Times News Review commissioning editor. You can find all the latest reporting on Prince Andrew at thetimes.com. The producers today were Edith Rousselot and Shabnam Grewal. The executive producer was Edward Drummond, and sound design and theme composition were by Maula Seto. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.